Hello, it's Adam from Newscast.
And it is Marianna in the worldwide headquarters of Americast, but currently this sort of collab station, as we'll call it.
And it's Anthony in the American headquarters of Americast and home to World Cup matches very, very soon.
And John Murray sitting at my desk where I'm preparing for my commentaries at the forthcoming World Cup.
And we're recording the second episode on Thursday, the 4th of June, mid-afternoon. So it reflects the world as it is as we're sitting here in the studio and our various home studios and international bureaus as well. So first of all, let's zoom in on the situation with Iran, and not necessarily the military situation or the diplomatic situation, which is still in flux, but Iran's actual presence at the World Cup or not. And John, is it true that Iran, by sort of quirk of fate, were one of the first few teams to actually qualify?
Well, they were, but obviously, everything has changed over the recent months in the immediate build-up to this World Cup, and really, this is the of all of the issues that we've got, and there are many issues surrounding this World Cup. You know, this is top of the tree, isn't it? Because of the proximity and everything that's been going on over the course of recent weeks.
And Anthony, do we know if the Iranian football team are actually going to be allowed to play, whether they'll be able to play in the US, whether they'll be able to enter the US? What's the deal at the moment?
It looks like they're going to play in the U.S. It looks like they will be able to enter the U.S. It does not look like they're going to stay the night in the U.S. during their matches. The Trump administration had said that it was not safe for them to be here overnight. And Claudia Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, actually stepped in and offered to host the Iranian national team in Mexico between their matches. So it appears they're going to fly in, play their match, and then go back to Mexico, which can't be all that convenient for them, but it is a way of sidestepping what has been a kind of a sticky political situation here.
Well, yeah, because Anthony, there was that post on Truth Social from Donald Trump in March that was actually a bit ambiguous or maybe a bit contradictory, where he says the Iran national soccer team is welcome to the World Cup, but I really don't believe it's appropriate that they're here for their own life and safety. What's he actually getting at there? What's the threat to them?
That's a good question. And as you mentioned, it's kind of vague what the life and safety threats are. I think that the Trump officials kind of walked that back after the fact. I talked to Andrew Giuliani, who Trump put in charge of security at the World Cup. And I asked him about that Truth Social post. And he said, well, no, Iran is welcome here. They're welcome to play their matches here. And that Donald Trump later clarified that they could do it. But it did seem kind of like a veiled threat, right? And also Donald Trump trying to encourage them not to come because he didn't want the optics, the visual images of Iran playing World Cup matches on American soil at a time when the United States and Iran were in the midst of hostilities on the battlefield.
And it also sounds like there's an issue because some of the people in the squad, or who might end up being on the team, had served in the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is a banned terrorist organization in the US. So there's a question about ability to enter the country.
Well, that's right. And I think from the point of view of the individuals who are involved, quite apart from what's going on back in the Middle East, for the players who are involved in this, there is so much uncertainty. And, you bring together a squad of 26 plus all of the rest of the staff that you would normally expect to be there with a World Cup squad. And, there'll be a whole range of opinions and feelings. I think we saw this with the women's team, the Iranian women's team at the Asia Cup in Australia earlier in the year. But we don't, so much uncertainty. What sort of reception will this squad, will the team get when they actually get to the venue? So they're going to play the first two matches in Los Angeles against New Zealand and Belgium, and then the third group match against Egypt in Seattle. Everything that will be going on around those matches, it's a total unknown. And also, what will be happening politically? How will this war develop over the course of the time that they're there? And I think physically and mentally as well, to be based in Mexico, in Tijuana, and making those journeys back and forth to Los Angeles and then the long trip to Seattle as well, that will take its toll. And I know there are much more important things than what is happening in the sport, but if they're able to get a point at this World Cup, I would be amazed.
And John, I mean, we talked about Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, in the previous episode. He, to me, seems like somebody who does not want politics, diplomacy, conflict to interfere with his giant, some might say, money-making jamboree. But I wonder if he, like lots of people, are discovering in this era that you only have so much control. And actually, once things start happening, it's in the hands of lots of other people.
Yeah, but if there's one thing we know about Gianni Infantino is that he is not easily swayed, and he has been adamant from the outbreak of the conflict, from once the point the war started, all of the various discussions about whether Iran would be involved. He has been unswerving that Iran would be a part of this and will play at this World Cup, and visa permitting. As we speak now, it looks as though we will, which is a remarkable situation. We'll be talking about this and referring back to Iran playing at this 2026 World Cup for years and years to come.
Also, John, there's a possibility, isn't there, that Iran could actually play the US?
Yeah, that's right. Because it's such a big World Cup with 48 teams, and because that means that third place teams will be going through, some of the third place teams in the group, it's very difficult to work out who will play who, but it is a possibility that they could end up playing each other in the round of 16. Can you imagine everything that would surround that match? It would be.
I mean, I think that's where it's almost impossible to avoid the politics if they meet
it
each
is.
other.
And they actually played in 1998, the U.S. and Iran, and there was a lot of fraught political tension there, and that was just because of the Iranian Revolution in '79 and the various lower level clashes between the United States and Iran over the ensuing decade. So the stage would be set for something that would be very dramatic if it gets to that. And I we'll see. I don't think it's likely, but you never know with soccer. Anything's possible, right?
Yeah, and just to give you a little bit of an insight, into what players might be thinking. I mentioned earlier about Argentina playing England in '86, which was 4 years after the Falklands War. But I've got my copy of Diego Maradona's autobiography next to me here, because there's a paragraph where he talks about this, because I do remember at the time, the Argentina players would say, well, this is sport, this is not about the World Cup. But in his autobiography, Diego Maradona says, quote, "Of course, before the match, we said that football had nothing to do with the Malvinas War. But we knew a lot of Argentinian kids had died there, shot down like little birds. This was revenge. It was like recovering a little bit of the Malvinas."
Wow.
So that was '86. And, I think you can see into the minds of the Iranian players should that situation come about where Iran plays the United States at this World Cup, can't you?
And we should say there's reports that they don't have their visas yet. So actually, that's why we're still in the zone of speculation about what might happen in the next few weeks. Anthony, talking about the US visa regime, it's been toughened up a lot in the last year or so. And there are some countries who have qualified for the World Cup, but whose citizens, and by extension, whose football players, are almost sort of effectively banned from entering the US.
Right, Iran, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Haiti, all of these countries are covered by the visa bans that the Trump administration has instituted. So the teams will, you would imagine, be able to get in. Even Iran, I don't think they want to create a diplomatic incident where they block the visas of the players. But the fans who want to come and support their teams is going to be much more difficult for them to get in. Now, the Trump administration has made provisions for streamlining visa applications from World Cup countries. If you have tickets, you have a special means of applying for visas, but there's still a lot of bureaucracy. And for those specific countries, it still seems like there's some pretty significant hurdles for anyone who wanted to come here from, say, Haiti and cheer on the Haitian team, which very rarely plays in a World Cup, let alone one that is so close to their home country, and yet they are going to find it very difficult to get here and to cheer for their team.
And Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, said in November, your FIFA ticket is not a US visa, which must sound great if you just paid 22 grand for that ticket. Also, Anthony, I'm a bit confused about the status of the kind of the border checks that you get now if you go to the US, because this whole thing about, they're gonna rake through all your social media posts for years and years and years, and they might do it in front of you, and you might get turned away at the airport. What's the status of all that stuff?
They said they will look, and there have been some high-profile incidents where people have been prohibited from entering the country, but they're high-profile. I think if you're a fan who is not a famous personality coming in, I don't think you have to worry too much about them going through your social media profile at this point. But it has a chilling effect. All of this has a chilling effect for people who are looking at coming into the United States for what was presented back when they announced this as a huge event that would showcase the United States and be able to turbocharge American tourism for years to come. And now there is this shadow being cast over it based on the immigration policies of the Trump administration, the crackdowns on undocumented migrants throughout this country, and many of which are from countries. Many of the people are coming from countries or here from countries that are participating in the World Cup. And so it is... if I had a ticket and I was coming from someplace, I would personally not be worried too much about it, but I can understand why it would be a concern.
The social media profiles thing is quite interesting because I've been getting quite a lot of messages from people who are concerned about that. Like, if you post criticism of Donald Trump or JD Vance, will you be prohibited from entering the country? And what I would say is actually, although exactly like Anthony says, there are lots of high-profile examples in the US. I mean, there are also high-profile examples here recently where people have been denied entry to the UK. That actually,
people who you can watch live streaming,
but to millions of people,
phone,
but they can't speak to a smaller crowd of people, etc. Which is interesting in and of itself. But I think it's just become, putting, and that's not to say that it's right in any way or to make a judgment call on it, but to put people's social media like handles on visa applications, I think is just becoming sort of what everyone does now. And like Anthony says, it would take a lot of time to trawl through everybody's social media, including all the football fans.
And John, when they look at your work in the past, they'll just be very impressed, I'm sure. Now, Marianna, we're going to talk about ICE now, who are the Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers who were big news a couple of months ago. Just remind us of the context of why there was so much concern and anger around the ICE agents.
Yeah, so there were two very high-profile killings of people in the US by ICE, which is this US Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers. And I think one of the reasons why these were such sort of high-profile cases is because they were American citizens who were killed, and also because they seemed like the average person, and because footage of those killings was also then made available, and a lot of people had filmed the aftermath and so on and so forth, and it was quite shocking and quite emotive, and it sparked this huge conversation about whether ICE officers were going beyond what they should be doing in terms of their jobs and using violence when it maybe wasn't necessary. And ICE has, and then people start talking about the World Cup and saying, well, hang on a second, this is just happening on, a random day. What about when there are loads and loads of fans here from all different places? Are they going to be carrying out these kinds of like raids and checks, and could it get violent? ICE has said it's, quote, a key part of the overall security apparatus for the World Cup. So that means that they're kind of involved in security, but not necessarily in terms of enforcing immigration. But I think that people are still really worried that does that mean that, again, violence and force could be used in situations where it gets messy and horrible and people are killed.
Yeah, Anthony, do we have any more clarity on what ICE are actually going to be doing? Because it sounds like they'll be there around the stadiums along with the police.
That's the way it sounds, and they've been presented as being there to support security and to contribute to making sure that the facilities and sporting events are safe. But when you have ICE agents there, the concern is that they might start to check people's papers, to make sure that they have proper documentation, and that could, as Marianna suggests, create an environment for conflict. But the Trump administration has gone out of its way to say, no, there aren't going to be raids, there aren't going to be crackdowns around the stadiums. But if you were an Iranian national or you were a Haitian national who have been in the spotlight in American politics during the presidential campaign in 2024, and you're going to have a game watch maybe someplace even far from a stadium, a lot of people getting together from the Haitian community to watch, there would be cause for concern, because immigration officials have targeted communities and have targeted gathering locations for undocumented migrants in these immigrant communities before. So why would they believe what the administration is saying, that there isn't going to be any kind of stepped up enforcement this time around? It seems like a risk they may not be willing to take.
And John, you're heading to Mexico. Mexico has basically had a war between the government and the drug cartels, and then between the cartels too. And for the last few years has not felt like a very safe country. And I think some people will have been put off going on holiday there, even though lots of the holiday areas are very, very safe. What's your take on just the sort of the security situation and the stability in Mexico at the moment?
Yeah, stories about crime. The team that I'll be traveling with, we've had extra information given to us just to be on the safe side, to make sure that everyone's okay when they go there, just to be extra alert. But at the same time, I've spoken to BBC colleagues, Will Grant, our correspondent in Mexico City, who has given us very, very good advice about what it will be like being there. And I think it will be different in Mexico City. That would be my perception, because, of all of the places at this World Cup where I think you will get a feel of, in inverted commas, what the World Cup is all about, it's Mexico City, because they are football mad. And I think I get the impression as well that maybe the anger there is, and I know we'll come on to this in our third episode, but in my experience traveling to World Cups, one of the best supported teams is Mexico. They travel in their thousands. It's an amazing event to be at when Mexico play at the World Cup. Now they've got matches in 2026 in their own country, and so many of the people who would have traveled to those matches in other countries on the other side of the world can't afford to go to the matches that are now being played in Mexico. So I think there's a little bit of anger there as well, which is something that we'll have to be watching out for.
And football's obviously super popular in Mexico. Anthony, how is it faring in the US? Because soccer, as you call it, is not the most popular sport in America. And I certainly see a lot of posts slightly taking the mick out of American fans and suggesting that they kind of don't quite get it. Like they're very nice and friendly with their chanting in a way that certainly us British football fans are probably less so. I don't group myself among that. But.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, yes, obviously football, soccer, as we call it here, is not the most popular sport in the United States. That is American football and the NFL and basketball and maybe baseball as well. But it is a growing sport. It has the highest level of youth participation of any sport in the United States. Kids grow up playing soccer here all across various communities. About 10% of the American public says that soccer is their favorite sport of all of them. So, and that has been a steadily growing number, in part because of the growing number of migrants in this country from places where soccer is the one big sport. So something like this event will catch on quickly, because Americans like cheering for an American team. And if the U.S. does well, if it makes it to the knockout round, you only see that kind of fanaticism grow. Now, after the tournament's over, it'll go back to being one of the lower tier sports here in the United States, certainly nothing close to the NFL, but it does have a solid, reliable fan base. And if you go to these MLS soccer stadiums, whether it's Inter Miami down in Florida, or here in DC with DC United, or across the country, you will find a loyal fan base and people in the tens of thousands showing up for games regularly. So you can make fun of the United States and make fun of the soccer fanship here, but there are a bunch of us out there, and we are sticking with the sport through thick and thin.
And let's not forget that the interest in football in the USA is probably much greater than it was when they first hosted it back in USA 94. And another thing not to overlook is, of all of the previous 22 World Cups, that in 94 was the best attended. the biggest crowds because it was played in the biggest stadiums, but nevertheless, they set the records there. And this year, because it's a bigger tournament, more teams, more matches, it'll break the records again. This will be the most watched World Cup of all.
One of the things I find quite interesting is how I feel like the sort of increased interest in football in the US has gone hand in hand with football itself changing quite a lot and people deciding to support, for example, specific players rather than clubs necessarily. And it reminds me of I would have to say, terrible interaction that happened when I was out with Americast covering the election, and there were several of us, the production team, me, standing outside of a kind of pseudo pub bar place, and someone came up to us and asked, if we were British, and then asked if we liked football, and then proceeded to tell us that we said sort of, who do you support? And he said, I support Jude Bellingham. And I'd never heard anyone say anything like this. I was like, you can't support just the player. But I think that's quite interesting because it shows how players themselves have really grown their kind of individual profiles. And there'll be lots of people in the States who will have been following them specifically and will be really excited to see, their favourite player, not necessarily just their club, which is kind of a new dynamic.
Although getting into famous England players, there's some famous England players not going.
I know.
So actually, some of your pavement correspondents might be disappointed, Marianna.
Yeah, although I would be incredibly surprised if there were loads of massive kind of Cole Palmer and Phil Foden fans.
Say that, Marianna. Cole Palmer is absolutely massive.
Yeah, he is. And actually also because of that funny clip of him with Donald Trump, he will very much be in the American kind of conscience in that way. So maybe they're absolutely fuming at Thomas Tuchel. Who knows?
This is now veering into the contents of our third episode, which are going to be a bit more about what it's actually going to be like to be there, and maybe a little bit about how much money you have to have if you want to be there. So that will be coming up in our next episode of our trilogy of episodes with our trio of podcasts about the World Cup.